The warning. Nobody believed. The Grand Assembly Hall of Nexus Prime had witnessed countless historic moments across its 3,000-year existence. Today would mark another. Though few present realized it yet, the massive chamber stretched upward like a cathedral built for giants, its crystalline walls catching and refracting light from the system's twin suns. Representatives from 400 civilized species occupied the tiered seating, their varied forms creating a tapestry of galactic diversity. Chancellor Zephyrin of the Arconian Confederacy called the session to order with a resonant chime from his ceremonial staff. His silver skin reflected the ambient light as he surveyed the assembly with calm authority. The day's agenda promised to be routine, filled with trade disputes and resource allocation debates. Then the doors opened. A hush fell over the chamber as three figures entered. The Velthari were immediately recognizable despite their rarity. Tall and slender, their bodies seemed to shimmer slightly as if not quite solid in this dimension. They wore simple robes that changed color with each step, cycling through shades that had no names in most languages. These were the galaxy's oldest observers, species that had watched civilizations rise and fall for millions of years. They rarely spoke to anyone, and they never attended assembly sessions. The lead Velthari, Ambassador Torin, approached the central platform with movements that seemed to flow rather than walk. Every representative leaned forward in their seats. Even the most cynical politicians felt the weight of this moment. Honored members of the coalition, Torin's voice resonated through the chamber without technological amplification. I come bearing a warning about a species that will soon join your community. You must listen carefully, for the future of your civilization depends on your response. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Warnings from the Velthari were legendary but exceedingly rare. The last one had come 8,000 years ago, predicting the collapse of the Morphean Empire. They had been correct. Zephyrin gestured for silence. We are honored by your presence, Ambassador Torin. Please share your concerns with the assembly. Torin raised one elongated hand, and the air above the platform shimmered. A holographic image appeared, showing a small blue and green planet orbiting an unremarkable yellow star in the outer spiral arm of the galaxy. This world is called Earth. The dominant species calls themselves humans. They have not yet achieved faster than light travel, but they will within a decade. When they do, they will request membership in the coalition. You will accept them because they meet all the basic criteria. This would be a grave mistake. A representative from the Thorian collective stood, his crystalline body chiming with skepticism. Forgive my doubt, honored ambassador, but we have reviewed preliminary data on this species. They are technologically primitive, politically fractured, and confined to their single world. What possible threat could they pose to a coalition of 400 species, spanning 10,000 star systems? Torin turned to face the Thorian, and though the Velthari had no visible eyes, everyone felt the intensity of that gaze. You asked the wrong question. Humans are not a threat because they will attack you. They are a threat because they will change you in ways you cannot imagine or control. The hologram shifted, showing scenes from Earth's history. Humans crossing frozen wastelands wearing the skins of dead animals. Humans diving into turbulent oceans despite having no natural ability to breathe underwater. Humans climbing mountains that reached above the clouds, where the air grew too thin to sustain life. Humans building vast cities, then destroying them in wars, then building them again even larger. Every species in this chamber evolved on worlds that welcomed them, Torin continued. Your home planets provided abundant resources, stable climates, and environments suited to your biology. You adapted to your worlds through natural selection, developing traits that helped you thrive in nurturing ecosystems. The images changed to show Earth's violence, earthquakes that shattered cities, hurricanes that scoured coastlines, volcanoes that buried entire regions in ash, droughts that turned fertile land to dust, ice ages that covered continents and glaciers kilometers thick. Earth is different. Earth tried to kill humanity every single day for 3 million years. Hurricanes, earthquakes, volcanoes, floods, droughts, ice ages, predators with teeth longer than your fingers, diseases that killed millions, and temperature swings that would devastate most civilized worlds. The planet was actively hostile to human survival. A Quelrian diplomat, her bioluminescent patterns flickering with curiosity, spoke up. Many species face environmental challenges during their evolutionary period. This seems dramatic but not unique. You still do not understand, Torin replied, and now there was something almost like sadness in that ethereal voice. Other species adapted to their challenges. Humans refused to adapt. When they could not survive the cold, they did not evolve thicker skin or insulating fur. They killed other animals and wore their pelts. When they could not digest certain plants, they did not develop new digestive systems. They discovered fire and cooked food until it became edible. When predators hunted them, they did not grow claws or venom. They sharpened stones and fought back. The hologram showed early humans with primitive tools. Then the tools became more sophisticated. Stone became bronze. Bronze became iron. Iron became steel. Simple clubs became spears, became bows, became firearms, became weapons that could level cities. Humans did not adapt to their environment, Torin said. They adapted their environment to themselves. And when their environment could no longer challenge them sufficiently, they began challenging each other. They invented competition, not just for survival but for entertainment. They race against each other for no purpose except to determine who is fastest. They climb mountains simply because the mountains exist. They explore dangerous places knowing they might die, driven by nothing but curiosity. The assembly watched in fascination and growing unease as the hologram displayed human athletic competitions, exploration missions, and scientific experiments, humans deliberately placing themselves in danger to test limits and discover new knowledge. A military commander from the Galactic Empire stood, her armored plates clicking together. This sounds like a species prone to violence and risk-taking behavior. Perhaps they would make useful soldiers, but hardly a civilization-altering threat. That is exactly the thinking that makes them so dangerous to you, Torin responded. You see their traits individually and fail to understand what they become when combined. Let me show you something else. The hologram changed to show human families, human communities, human cities, people helping strangers, rescue workers pulling victims from disasters, soldiers carrying wounded comrades, scientists from different nations collaborating on projects, artists creating beauty from suffering. Humans form emotional bonds with extraordinary intensity, Torin explained. They bond with their families, their friends, their communities, and their entire species. More remarkably, they bond with other species. They adopt predators as companions and call them pets. They weep over the deaths of animals they kept in their homes. They will risk their lives to save creatures that cannot possibly understand or reciprocate their affection. The images showed humans with dogs, cats, horses, even rescuing wild animals from danger. The assembly watched a recording of a human running into a burning building to save a trapped animal, nearly dying in the process. This emotional capacity makes them unpredictable, Torin continued. A human will follow rules and protocols perfectly until someone they care about is threatened. Then all rules become negotiable. They will lie, cheat, steal, fight, and die for those they consider part of their group. And humans have an unsettling tendency to consider almost anyone part of their group after minimal interaction. Zephyrin leaned forward in his seat, his earlier calm replaced by genuine concern. Are you suggesting they would be disruptive to coalition social structures? I am suggesting they will completely reshape your civilization, Torin replied. Humans do not accept limitations. They have a concept they call impossible, but they treat it as a challenge rather than a boundary. When their scientists declare something cannot be done, other humans immediately try to do it anyway. When they face problems with no known solution, they invent new solutions. They have a saying on their world that perfectly captures this mentality. That is not a bug, it is a feature. They take their flaws and disadvantages and transform them into advantages. The hologram displayed human innovations, medicine that conquered diseases, engineering that built structures reaching into the sky, technology that sent machines to other planets, art that expressed emotions in thousands of forms, philosophy that questioned everything including their own existence. They also refused to accept hierarchy based solely on age or tradition, Torin added. Young humans regularly question and challenge the decisions of elder humans. They demand evidence and logic rather than accepting authority. This tendency will spread to other species who interact with them. Your carefully maintained social structures will begin to erode. The assembly erupted in concerned chatter. Representatives conferred with their aides, checking data and running projections. The Velthari warning was being taken seriously now, but many still seemed skeptical that one primitive species could truly threaten galactic civilization. A senior representative from the Krellian Dominion stood, his 6 eyes blinking in sequence. Honored Ambassador, your concern is noted and appreciated. However, the Coalition has successfully integrated 399 species over the past 5,000 years. We have protocols, safeguards, and extensive experience managing diverse civilizations. Whatever unique qualities humans possess, surely we can accommodate them appropriately. We have dealt with aggressive species, innovative species, and emotionally complex species before. Torin was silent for a long moment. When the ambassador spoke again, the voice was softer but somehow more ominous. We have observed humanity for 50,000 of your standard years. We watched them discover fire. We watched them invent agriculture. We watched them split the atom, cure diseases, and send their machines to other worlds in their solar system. We watched them do all of this while simultaneously fighting among themselves in conflicts that killed millions. Imagine what they will accomplish when they finally have a common external purpose. Imagine what happens when they stop fighting each other and start collaborating fully. The hologram showed human space agencies, international research projects, and global communication networks. They are already beginning to unite. Their technology is accelerating exponentially. They will achieve faster than light travel within 10 years. When they do, they will come to you with open hands and eager minds. They will seem harmless, even charming. They will follow your rules at first. At first? Saffron echoed. Humans have another saying, Torin replied. It is easier to ask forgiveness than permission. They will observe your systems, learn your protocols, and then they will find every loophole, every exception, and every ambiguity. Not because they are malicious, but because they are curious and impatient. They will befriend your citizens, learn your languages, and begin changing your cultures from within. They will introduce concepts like entrepreneurship, creative problem-solving, and questioning authority. These ideas will spread like a virus through your civilization. The assembly hall filled with alarmed voices. This was sounding less like a warning about a single species, and more like a prediction of civilizational upheaval. Torin raised a hand, and silence fell once more. You will attempt to manage them. You will create special regulations and restrictions. These will fail. Humans are extraordinarily skilled at finding ways around rules they consider unfair or unnecessary. You will attempt to isolate them. This will also fail because other species will be drawn to them. Humans have a quality that is difficult to quantify, but impossible to ignore. They make life more interesting. They bring excitement, novelty, and possibility. Species that have followed the same routines for thousands of years will suddenly wonder if there might be a better way. Young members of your civilizations will be especially susceptible to human influence. The hologram showed projected scenarios. Human traders establishing relationships across the galaxy. Human engineers working on coalition projects. Human artists sharing their culture. Human explorers venturing into dangerous regions. And everywhere they went, change followed. Within 50 years of joining the coalition, humans will have touched every aspect of your civilization, Torin predicted. Within 100 years, you will struggle to remember what your society looked like before they arrived. Within 200 years, the coalition will be unrecognizable. You will be louder, more chaotic, more innovative, more unpredictable, and more dynamic. Whether this is ultimately good or bad, I cannot say, but it is inevitable. Saffron stood, his posture rigid with barely concealed frustration. Ambassador Torin, your warning is recorded in our official archives and will be given serious consideration. The Council will establish protocols for human integration when the time comes. We will monitor the situation carefully and take appropriate precautions. Is there anything else you wish to add? The 3 Velthari turned toward the exit. As they reached the massive doors, Torin paused and looked back at the assembly. The ambassador's final words echoed through the silent chamber. Yes. One final thing. When the humans arrive, and they will arrive sooner than you expect, remember this moment. Remember that we warned you. Remember that we told you they would change everything. And remember that everything we have told you today is a conservative estimate. We have tried to find words in your languages to express what humans truly are and what they are capable of becoming. We have failed. Some things can only be understood through direct experience. You will simply have to see for yourselves. The doors closed behind the Velthari with a soft whisper of displaced air. The assembly chamber erupted in heated debate. Representatives argued about the credibility of the warning, the potential threat level, and appropriate response measures. Some dismissed the entire presentation as paranoid speculation from a species that had grown too old and too fearful, Others took extensive notes and began drafting. Preliminary Containment Protocols Chancellor. Zephyrin ordered the warning filed in the Historical Archives under Xenological Assessments, with a notation for future review. Then he moved on to the next item on the agenda. Within an hour, most representatives had stopped thinking about Earth and its unusual inhabitants. They had more immediate concerns to address. 50 light-years away in a small laboratory at the European Space Research Center, Dr. Sarah Chen stared at her computer screen in disbelief. The quantum propulsion calculations had finally stabilized. The prototype drive system was showing exactly the energy signature they had been hoping for. She grabbed her phone and called her colleague. "James, it works. The drive actually works. We can achieve faster than light travel." On the other end of the line, Dr. James Mitchell let out a whoop of joy. "How soon can we build a test vehicle?" "If we get funding approval, maybe 5 years. 8 at most. We are going to the stars, Sarah. Humanity is going to the stars." Neither of them knew they had just been discussed by the most powerful political body in the galaxy. Neither knew that their achievement had been predicted decades ago by beings older than most civilizations. They simply did what humans had always done. They saw something impossible and made it possible. They reached for the stars because the stars were there to be reached. On Nexus Prime, Chancellor Zephyrin reviewed his notes from the day's session. The Velthari warning troubled him, but surely it was overblown. One species, no matter how unusual, could not truly threaten the stability of a coalition that had endured for 5 millennia. They would integrate humanity carefully, manage their influence, and maintain order as they had always done. He filed the report and prepared for the next day's session, completely unaware that his civilization was about to encounter a force of nature that would indeed change everything. The warning had been given. The warning had been recorded. And like so many warnings throughout history, it would be understood only in hindsight when it was far too late to do anything except adapt. Humanity was coming to the stars, and the galaxy would never be the same. First contact and unexpected consequences, 5 years and 7 months after the Velthari warning. The Coalition's Deep Space Monitoring Network detected an anomaly in the outer regions of Sector 7. A vessel had emerged from faster-than-light travel using a propulsion signature that matched no known technology in the database. The ship was small, roughly the size of a Coalition survey vessel, and it was broadcasting a repeating message in multiple electromagnetic frequencies. Within hours, the message had been decoded. It was simple, almost childlike in its directness. "Hello. This is the Earth vessel Horizon's Promise. We come in peace. We seek friendship and knowledge. Please respond." The Coalition responded by dispatching the diplomatic vessel Harmonious Dawn, a ship specifically designed for first contact situations. Commander Velix, a veteran diplomat from the Arconian Confederacy, stood on the bridge as his ship approached the human vessel. He had reviewed all available data on humanity during the journey. The Velthari warning was mentioned in the files, but it had been flagged as speculative and unverified. Velix had participated in 47 first contact scenarios. He considered himself well prepared for any situation. He was wrong. The human ship was crewed by Coalition standards, held together with what appeared to be welds and bolted plates rather than molecular bonding. Yet it had successfully achieved faster-than-light travel, and the quantum signature suggested their drive system was actually more efficient than current Coalition technology. This was unusual but not unprecedented. Sometimes isolated species developed innovations through unique problem-solving approaches. Velix opened a communication channel. "Human vessel Horizon's Promise. This is Commander Velix of the Coalition ship Harmonious Dawn. On behalf of the Coalition of Civilized Worlds, I welcome you to the greater galactic community. Please prepare to receive our diplomatic envoy." The response came immediately, and Velix was struck by the sheer enthusiasm in the human's voice. "Commander Velix, this is incredible. We are honored and excited beyond measure. Please come aboard our ship. We have been dreaming of this moment for generations." The docking procedure revealed the first peculiarity. The human airlock did not match any standard Coalition design. It took 30 minutes of careful adjustment before a secure seal could be established. When Velix finally entered the human ship, accompanied by 2 security officers and a xenobiologist, he found himself in a cramped corridor decorated with what appeared to be Motivational phrases printed on the walls. Reach for the stars. Never give up. The only impossible journey is the one you never begin. Captain Sarah Chen met them in the corridor, practically bouncing with excitement despite the visible exhaustion on her face. She was short by Arconian standards, with dark hair pulled back in a practical style and eyes that seemed to absorb everything around her. She extended her hand in what Velix's database indicated was a human greeting gesture. Commander Velix, I cannot tell you how amazing this is. We have been monitoring your communication networks for 3 years, learning your trade language and studying your culture. We built this ship in 18 months. My crew has been living in these cramped quarters for 9 months just to reach this point, and now we are actually meeting aliens. Real aliens! This is the greatest moment of my life. Velix accepted the hand gesture, noting the surprising strength in her grip. Humans were physically weaker than Arconians, yet there was intensity in this woman that made him oddly cautious. We are pleased to meet you as well, Captain Chen. The Coalition welcomes humanity to the galactic community. We have prepared a comprehensive introduction package covering our history, laws, and membership protocols. Over the following weeks, Velix came to understand why the Velthari might have been concerned. Humans were unlike any species he had ever encountered. They asked endless questions, often returning to topics they had already discussed to explore them from new angles. They showed emotion freely, laughing at things that seemed unremarkable and becoming visibly moved by simple acts of kindness. They formed attachments with alarming speed, treating his crew as friends after only days of interaction. Most remarkably, they challenged everything, not aggressively but with genuine curiosity that refused to accept explanations like, "That is how it has always been done," or "That is simply our way." During one briefing session, Velix explained the Coalition's tiered membership system. New species began as probationary members with limited rights and responsibilities. After demonstrating stability and cultural compatibility, they could advance to junior member status, and eventually, after centuries of participation, to senior member status. Captain Chen listened carefully, then frowned. Why does it take centuries? If a species is stable and compatible, why make them wait so long for full participation? The system ensures gradual integration, Velix explained patiently. Rapid change can be destabilizing. But couldn't slow integration also be destabilizing? If capable species are held back artificially, wouldn't that create resentment? Velix had never considered this perspective. The system has worked successfully for 5,000 years. That is impressive, Chen acknowledged. But have you ever tested whether a different system might work better? How do you know this is the optimal approach if you have never tried alternatives? The question lodged in Velix's mind uncomfortably. It felt simultaneously reasonable and inappropriate. Of course the system worked. It had always worked. But had anyone actually evaluated whether it could work better? 3 months later, formal first contact ceremonies took place on Nexus Prime. Humanity was granted probationary member status and assigned settlement rights on 4 frontier worlds in the outer sectors. These were worlds that other species had surveyed and rejected as too challenging for comfortable habitation. Chancellor Zephyrin personally welcomed the human delegation. Captain Chen had been joined by representatives from Earth's unified provisional government, scientists, engineers, and cultural ambassadors. They all radiated the same intense enthusiasm that Velix had observed on the Horizon's promise. Humanity, Zephyrin intoned formally. The Coalition welcomes you. We offer you guidance, protection, and opportunity to grow within our community. In time, if you prove yourselves worthy, you may achieve full membership rights. The human ambassador, a dignified older man named Ambassador Okonkwo, bowed respectfully. Chancellor, on behalf of all humanity, we accept this honor with gratitude and excitement. We pledge to follow Coalition law, contribute to galactic society, and prove ourselves worthy partners. We look forward to learning from species with millions of years of experience. It was a perfectly appropriate response. Zephyrin felt satisfied. The integration was proceeding normally. He had no idea what was actually beginning. Within 6 months, the first wave of human colonists arrived at their assigned worlds. Coalition observers expected a period of struggle and adaptation as the humans confronted harsh environments. Instead, the humans seemed delighted. They called the desert world of Eridus challenging but beautiful, and immediately began experimenting with aggressive terraforming techniques. They established settlements on the ice world Frostheim by building underground habitats heated by geothermal energy, a solution that had not occurred to previous survey teams. They turned the high-gravity world Titan's Rest into an athletic training facility, claiming the intense gravity was perfect for building strength. The second wave of changes was more subtle. Human traders began appearing on coalition stations and worlds. They operated within the law, but they approached commerce with aggressive creativity that startled established merchants. They undercut prices by optimizing supply chains in ways that seemed obvious only in hindsight. They offered combination deals and loyalty programs that other traders had never considered. They negotiated with intensity and good humor that felt both refreshing and unsettling. Human engineers hired themselves out for lower wages than established professionals, then proceeded to observe and learn everything about the projects they joined. Within a year, human-led firms were offering competing services based on modified versions of coalition technology. The modifications were different enough to avoid patent violations, but functional enough to disrupt established markets. Human entertainment spread through the galactic network like wildfire. Their music was chaotic and emotional compared to the harmonious compositions preferred by most species. Their stories were filled with conflict and resolution, rather than the contemplative narratives common in coalition culture. Their visual art was bold and provocative. Young aliens from dozens of species began consuming human media voraciously, much to the dismay of their elders. But the most profound impact was social. Humans made friends everywhere they went. They did not respect the careful social hierarchies that had evolved over millennia. They would speak to a junior technician with the same openness they used with a senior administrator. They asked personal questions that other species considered intrusive, but somehow made them feel like genuine interest rather than rudeness. They shared meals, told jokes, and formed bonds that crossed species barriers that had existed for thousands of years. Velix watched these changes with growing unease. He had been assigned to monitor human integration, and his reports grew longer and more concerned with each passing month. 3 years after first contact, he requested an emergency meeting with Chancellor Zephyrin. "Chancellor, the human situation is escalating beyond normal integration patterns," Velix reported, displaying data across multiple screens. They have established presences on 73 worlds, despite being limited to 4 colony planets. They have formed trade relationships with 217 different species. Human cultural products account for 18% of all entertainment consumption in the outer sectors, and that percentage is rising rapidly. Most concerning, we are seeing behavioral changes in other species, particularly younger individuals, who have adopted human attitudes and mannerisms. Zephyrin studied the data carefully. "What kind of behavioral changes?" Questioning of authority. Request for explanation rather than acceptance of traditional protocols. Increased risk-taking. Emotional openness. And most problematically, collaborative projects that bypass official channels. We have detected at least 50 unauthorized research groups composed of humans and various alien species working on projects that violate technology restrictions. Unauthorized research? Zephyrin's silver skin darkened with concern. What kind of projects? Weapons development, advanced propulsion systems, artificial intelligence, genetic modification. When we attempt to shut down these projects, the participants argue that they are technically not violating any specific laws because they have found loopholes in the regulations. The humans seem particularly skilled at identifying these loopholes. Zephyrin was quiet for a long moment. The Velthari warning mentioned this. They said humans would find ways around our rules. Yes, Chancellor. I reviewed that warning again recently. It is proving disturbingly accurate. What do you recommend? Velix hesitated. That is the problem, Chancellor. Every action we might take seems likely to make the situation worse. If we attempt to restrict human movement, other species who have formed friendships with them will protest. If we enforce existing regulations more strictly, we will be accused of discrimination. If we ignore the situation, the changes will continue accelerating. The Velthari were correct. We cannot manage humans. We can only respond to them. Before Zephyrin could answer, an urgent communication interrupted the meeting. The outer border stations were reporting unusual activity. An unidentified fleet had entered coalition space. The ships matched no known configuration. Within an hour, the truth became clear. The Krathos swarm had found the Coalition. The swarm was a hive mind species that the Coalition had encountered twice before in recorded history. Both times, the contact had ended in devastating wars that cost millions of lives before the swarm withdrew to regions unknown. The swarm did not communicate, did not negotiate, and did not seem to distinguish between military and civilian targets. They simply consumed everything in their path, converting biological matter into more swarm units. Now they had returned, and this time they had arrived with a fleet 10 times larger than any previous incursion. The Coalition military mobilized immediately, but the early engagements went poorly. The swarm's coordinated attacks overwhelmed traditional defensive tactics. They anticipated every standard military response and adapted their approach within hours. Coalition forces were disciplined and well-trained, but they followed doctrine that had been refined over centuries. The swarm had apparently studied that doctrine and learned how to defeat it. After losing 4 border stations and 2 colony worlds in the first week, the Coalition War Council convened an emergency session. Generals and admirals from the most powerful military species shared grim assessments. The swarm was advancing steadily. Casualties were mounting. Evacuation efforts were struggling to stay ahead of the invasion. At the current rate of advance, the swarm would reach heavily populated core worlds within 6 months. "We need new approaches," Admiral Korath of the Zenthari Empire declared, her armored plates rattling with frustration. "Our traditional tactics are failing. The swarm adapts too quickly to our standard formations and strategies. Perhaps we should consider unconventional options," a voice suggested from the back of the chamber. Every head turned. Captain Elena Torres of the Earth Defense Coalition stood in the observers section. She was young, barely 40 years old, with short-cropped hair and the lean build of someone who spent considerable time in combat training. As a probationary member species, humans had been invited to observe the War Council, but not to participate. Admiral Korath's eyes narrowed. "Captain Torres, this is a strategy session for Coalition Military Command. Observations from probationary species are not appropriate at this time." "With respect, Admiral, my species has extensive experience with warfare against overwhelming odds," Torres replied calmly. "We have been fighting each other for our entire history. We have developed tactics for situations where conventional approaches fail. Your species has barely left its homeworld," a Krellian general scoffed. "What could you possibly teach civilizations with millions of years of military experience?" Torres smiled, but it was not a friendly expression. "We can teach you how to win when the enemy thinks they have already won. We can teach you that rules and honor mean nothing to an enemy that does not share those values. And we can teach you that the best way to defeat a predictable enemy is to become unpredictable yourself." Silence fell across the council chamber. Chancellor Zefran, attending the meeting as a civilian observer, remembered the Veltari warning. Humans refuse to accept impossibility. When they face a problem with no solution, they create a new solution. "Admiral Korath," Zefran said quietly, "perhaps we should hear what Captain Torres has to say. We are losing this war using conventional methods. What do we have to lose by listening to an unconventional perspective?" Korath's plates rattled again, but she gestured for Torres to approach the strategy table. Torres walked forward confidently and studied the tactical displays, showing swarm movements and coalition defensive positions. "You are fighting them like this is a traditional war between civilized opponents," Torres observed. "You establish defensive lines, engage in pitched battles, and retreat in organized formations when overwhelmed. The swarm has learned to anticipate and counter all of these approaches. They are beating you because they know exactly what you are going to do." "What would you suggest?" Korath asked skeptically. Torres pointed to several locations on the tactical map. "Hit-and-run attacks, asymmetric warfare, psychological operations, make them chase ghosts, feed them false information, attack supply lines instead of engaging the main fleet directly, force them to spread their forces across wider areas, make every encounter unpredictable, use their strength against them. Those tactics are dishonorable," a Thanix general protested. "We do not ambush. We do not deceive. We fight with courage and integrity." "And you are losing," Torres said bluntly. "The swarm does not care about your honor. They care about consuming your worlds and killing your civilians. You can die with honor or you can survive with pragmatism. Choose." The council chamber erupted in angry voices. Some officers were outraged by Torres's dismissal of traditional military values. Others were intrigued despite themselves. The argument continued for hours, with no clear consensus emerging. Then news arrived that changed everything. The swarm had reached Sanctuary Station, a civilian research facility housing 50,000 scientists and their families. The station's defenses were minimal. Without immediate reinforcement, it would fall within days. The nearest coalition fleet was 4 days away. Sanctuary Station would be destroyed before help could arrive, unless someone tried something different. Captain Torres volunteered her ship and crew for an immediate response. Admiral Korath, desperate and out of options, gave authorization. The human vessel Resilient Dawn launched toward Sanctuary Station, carrying a crew of 35 humans and 15 alien volunteers who had worked with Torres before. They had no chance of defeating the swarm fleet through conventional engagement. They would have to be creative. As the ship entered faster than light travel, Velix received a personal message from Torres. It was short. Remember the Velthari warning. Humans refuse to accept impossibility. Watch what happens when we decide the impossible is just another problem to solve. The defense of Sanctuary Station would become legendary, a turning point in the war and in humanity's relationship with the Coalition. But that story would unfold in the desperate hours to come, when human creativity would clash with swarm inevitability, and the galaxy would learn what it truly meant when humans decided to fight for something they cared about. On Nexus Prime, Chancellor Zephyron sat in his office and finally understood what the Velthari had tried to tell him. Humans were not dangerous because they were strong. They were dangerous because they changed everyone around them. The young alien officers who had volunteered to serve under Torres had done so not because they were ordered to, but because she had inspired them to believe that impossible situations could be overcome. The warning had been accurate. Humanity was reshaping the Coalition, not through force or manipulation, but through example. They showed that rules could be questioned, that traditions could be improved, and that the only real limitations were the ones people accepted. The galaxy was changing. The only question now was whether that change would come fast enough to save Sanctuary Station and everyone on it. Comment for next part.